Casey, what is he doing? Don't touch him. Don't touch. Did you tell him, Casey, that you're an artist too? That you love to paint and draw? Maybe someday this is the kind of thing you'll do.
This is perfect. I just want to have something to stand this up on.
Yeah.
Because this is actually great. And we could sit right here behind the camera and just talk to him from like this distance, you know, because I don't want us to be in it. It's got to be just him. And we can like...
Growing up, I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life. I was always just kind of doing my own thing. I remember in grade school, there was an assignment where we had to draw ourselves in the future doing what we want to do. I drew a picture of myself standing in front of an easel with a curly pencil-thin mustache and a beret on my head. In the space where it said, "I want to be a blank," I just wrote artist. And that's partially held up. I mean, I don't know where I got the idea that I was going to be wearing berets in the future, but I've always known I want to be an artist of some sort. Somewhere along the way in my life, I got my hands on a flip camera and recorded myself running around my cousin's house doing ninja moves. I just thought it was the coolest fucking thing ever. After that day, there was no looking back. There just suddenly became this obsession with getting everything on camera. This urge to keep everything preserved as if memory wasn't enough. It was all aimless. None of my home movies had any goals in mind. It was just me having fun. But in 2018, I finally felt like I'd gotten the chance to make something important. I was in my first semester at Rutgers University. With no friends and nothing to do, I leapt at a creative opportunity that my mom presented to me. She told me that my aunt had sat down my 86-year-old grandfather and asked him some questions about his life. She also said my aunt wanted to send me the footage so that I could maybe piece it together into something watchable, something for the family. I thought this was a great idea, and I was almost a little upset that I hadn't gotten the chance to arrange the filming of it in the first place. The footage she'd sent me wasn't bad at all. It just didn't have great audio, and it was filmed with my grandfather and his brother, and they were both grumbling over each other for most of it, as brothers do. My grandfather was never good in front of a camera or an audience. He was always the one behind the camera. And the questions he was being asked were kind of all over the place. There didn't seem to be any coherence. But the stories they were telling were unbelievable. It was like nothing I'd ever heard.
A castle, a very old castle. And in that castle, at that time it wasn't occupied by anybody, but the Germans, I think it was, they made a fort, storing ammunition there.
It suddenly hit me that my grandfather was not only a time capsule spanning almost a century, but he was this gold mine of information. Stories of poverty and death and war and suffering and immigration. It was breathtaking just to hear about in these short clips. I knew that I wanted to do something with this, a personal project, something to take up my time, something to distract me. I felt like at this point, if I'd tried to do my own version of the project, it would be like I was stealing my aunt's thunder and making it my own separate thing. But after a conversation, giving me the seal of approval, I knew that I had something potentially great on my hands. I didn't have any real film equipment. I just sat him in front of my phone. I needed to generate the impression that it was just him telling stories to his grandchildren. Otherwise, I feared he'd get stiff and emotionless.
I just want you to start by saying your full name and how old you are. That's it. Just tell us.
Oh, I have to specify who I am?
Yeah, just for the sake,
Like in a court of law?
Yeah, just to start the video.
Going into the interview, I did not expect it to have the effect on me that it did. After we sat down and I asked him the first question, the air in the room changed entirely.
And at the time, Mussolini, the dictator, was in power in Italy.
After a few minutes, the camera disappeared and he completely let go.
Yeah, that region, because of the location. Anyway, it was so rudimental, you know, it's incredible. Now, when you think about this, it's like thinking about the Stone Age. Clean. That's what she would take the clothes, spread them, and put them there, and it would dry very quickly. Because, you know, they think they're part of his family. So you go out of town to meet a girl, you know.
By the end, neither of us had expected to check the time and see that 4 hours had passed by.
Really?
It was an almost out-of-body experience. This man, who was generally so quiet and stoic and reserved, had opened himself up to me in ways that I couldn't imagine. I feel like I'd already had a great relationship with my grandfather. I'd spend a lot of time with him, just the two of us, over the summers or any chances that I'd get. Usually he'd give me chores to do and force a $50 bill into my pocket on the way out, but it never felt like work. He'd usually stay with me the whole time, and we'd just talk in Italian about religion or space or the world or food or nature. I should have known that someone as passionate about the simple things would have such an extraordinary story to tell. He's lived through 8 decades. He'll be 89 in September this year. And now his story, well, most of it at least, is on film for future generations to see. This film, it became a full family collaborative project. My aunts helped me assemble the archival footage, my mom helped me put together questions that might stir the pot, my dad gave me editing advice, and at the helm of all of it was my creative vision. I'm so glad he got to tell me his story. I needed a subject, and he needed a listener. My grandfather spends a lot of time in his garden, growing food, nursing broken branches back to life. In a way, I think Poppy's spent his entire life in a garden. He's watched so many different plants grow, he's seen so many different flowers shrivel and die, so many creatures pass through, animals that try to creep in and eat what he's worked to grow. He's protective of his garden. He's always been. In 2018, my grandfather collapsed on the sidelines of a soccer field at his granddaughter's match. It was sudden cardiac arrest. Survival rate is about 3 to 10%. If there hadn't been 3 health workers who happened to be on the sidelines with him, he'd surely have died. But he didn't. He broke all his ribs. He cracked his sternum from the CPR, spent months in the hospital and rehab. And now he's back to normal, like nothing ever happened. And since his accident, I've asked him on several occasions how he feels about himself, his health, about his life in general. And he always says the same thing, that he feels better than he's ever felt. I hope I can say the same when I'm his age.